This is HOA boardroom battles. I saved every receipt and every timestamp. I will make sure everyone hears about this. That was Diane Johnson screaming at me from 3 feet away in my own driveway, holding her phone on a gimbal so close I could see my reflection in the lens. She was filming everything. The HOA had zero tolerance, and she was starting with my fence. I had a bundle of fence pickets under one arm and a cordless drill in my other hand, bit visible, and I was not moving. Diane was the pool and amenities chair for the Fairview Estates Association in Worcester, Massachusetts, and she controlled access like a bouncer. Right now she was blocking my gate, waving a rolled-up piece of fence fabric screening like it was a biohazard. "You cannot use that," she said. "It is not in the design palette." I work remote as a software developer, video calls all day, and I had been on a call when I heard her car door slam in my driveway. I hung up mid-sentence, grabbed my drill, and came outside. The fabric was still rolled up on the ground next to my fence line. I had not even unrolled it yet. Diane was already taking photos, already building a case. "I have not installed anything yet," I said. "I do not care what you think, I care what the rule says." She jabbed her finger toward the rolled fabric. "That color is not approved. That weave is not approved. You need a variance application and board pre-approval before you touch that fence." I had lived here 8 months. I bought the house in March because the price was reasonable and the commute to client sites was manageable when I had to go in person. The HOA seemed fine at first. Quiet neighborhood, master plan community where fences were treated like sacred law, everything neat and controlled. Then I put in a small vegetable garden in May and got a warning letter about unapproved landscaping changes. I ignored it. In June, I pressure washed my driveway and got another letter saying I needed to submit a maintenance notification form. I ignored that one too. Now it was early August, humid heat shimmer rising off asphalt in the driveway, and Diane had decided I was her priority target. "The fabric is gray," I said. "The fence is gray. It matches." "It is not on the palette," she said. "I can put you on the agenda and keep you there." That was the boomerang line. I heard it clearly. I did not realize yet how much I would need it later. Diane handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a printed screenshot of a section from the HOA design guidelines. The paragraph was highlighted in yellow. It said all fence modifications required advance written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. It said non-compliance would result in immediate enforcement action. I read it twice. The language was strict. It did not say pre-approval for new fences, it said modifications. Technically, adding privacy screening to an existing fence counted. "I am not modifying the structure," I said. "I am adding a fabric screen. It is removable." Diane smiled. "That is a modification. You are changing the appearance of an exterior structure visible from the street or common area. The guidelines are clear." She turned and walked to her car, a white SUV parked at the curb, and came back with a clipboard. She wrote something on a form and tore off a copy. It was a bright orange windshield sticker that said violation without readable details. She tried to stick it to my truck windshield. I stepped in front of her. "Do not touch my truck," I said. "This is an official notice," she said. "You are in violation. The next step is a certified letter demanding fees and pretending the fence guideline is law. If you do not comply, we will escalate." She stuck the sticker to the clipboard instead and handed it to me. I took it. The sticker had a date, a case number, and a line that said failure to remedy within 72 hours may result in fines, liens, or other enforcement actions. It did not say what the violation actually was. It just said non-compliance with community standards. I folded it and put it in my pocket. Diane got back in her SUV and left. I stood in my driveway holding fence pickets and a drill, watching her taillights disappear around the corner. A couple on a porch 2 houses down were watching, like it was a show. I waved. They did not wave back. I went inside and called my attorney. Her name was Lisa. I had hired her in June after the second warning letter, just a consultation to understand my options. She told me to document everything, keep copies, and do not ignore certified mail. I told her what just happened. She asked if I had video. I did not. She said get a doorbell camera today. I ordered one on my phone while we were still talking. Lisa said Diane could not legally stick a violation sticker on my truck without a formal hearing process. She said the HOA had to follow its own bylaws, and those bylaws required written notice, an opportunity to respond, and a board vote before any penalty. She said the bright orange windshield sticker was intimidation, not enforcement. Do not take the fabric down, Lisa said. Do not give her a win. I said I would not. That afternoon, I installed the doorbell camera and aimed it at the driveway and the front gate. Then I unrolled the fence fabric and started attaching it to the chain link with zip ties. It was a simple privacy screen, dark gray mesh, designed to block the view from the street into my backyard. It took me an hour. I worked slowly, making sure every tie was neat. The couple on the porch were still watching. I ignored them. The next morning, I got a certified letter. It was from the Fairview Estates Association, signed by Diane Johnson as pool and amenities chair. The letter said I was in violation of Section 4.7 of the Community Design Guidelines. It said I had failed to obtain pre-approval for a fence modification. It said I had 48 hours to remove the non-compliant material or face a fine of $100 per day. It said continued non-compliance could result in a lien on my property. I scanned the letter and emailed it to Lisa. She called me back in 10 minutes. She said the letter was full of procedural problems. The HOA had not given me a formal hearing notice. The fine amount was not in the bylaws. The lien threat was premature. She said we needed to respond in writing and force them to follow their own process. I also need to finish a contract review for a client today, I told her. My attorney needs one more document today and the HOA is stalling to run out the clock. Lisa said she understood. She said she would draft a response letter and send it to me for approval. I said thank you. Then I went back to work, but I could not focus. I kept thinking about Diane's face, the way she smiled when she handed me the clipboard, the certainty in her voice. I do not care what you think, I care what the rule says. That evening, I was in my backyard checking the zip ties on the fabric screen when I heard a car door slam again. I walked around the side of the house and saw a tow truck idling in front of my driveway. The driver was standing next to my truck looking at a work order on his phone. Diane was standing next to him, arms crossed. I walked up fast. What is going on? I said. Your truck is in violation of the parking covenant, Diane said. It has been parked in the driveway for more than 72 consecutive hours without being moved. That is a towable offense. I moved it yesterday, I said. I drove to the store. The driver looked uncomfortable. He said he needed to see proof of the violation before he could tow. Diane handed him a printed photo. It was a shot of my truck in the driveway, timestamped 3 days ago. The photo was grainy, taken from across the street. That does not prove I did not move it, I said. The burden of proof is on you, Diane said. If you cannot prove you moved it, the HOA assumes non-compliance. I pulled out my phone and opened my doorbell camera app. I scrolled back to yesterday afternoon and played the video. It showed me getting in my truck, backing out, and driving away. The timestamp was clear. I held the phone out to the driver. He watched the clip, nodded, and said he could not tow without a valid violation. Diane tried to argue. The driver got back in his truck and left. Diane stared at me. This is not over, she said. I know, I said. She walked to her SUV and drove away. I went inside and sent the doorbell video to Lisa with a note. Second tow attempt after I put them on notice to stop. Lisa replied immediately, file a police report for harassment. Document the pattern. I called the Worcester Police non-emergency line and explained the situation. The officer who took my report said it sounded like a civil dispute, but he made a note of the tow attempt in Diane's name. He said if it happened again, call 911 and report someone trying to illegally tow my vehicle. The next day, I got another certified letter. This one was from the HOA management company, not Diane. It said the board had scheduled a special hearing for my fence violation. The hearing was set for Thursday at 10 in the morning. That was 2 days away. The letter said failure to attend would result in a default judgment and immediate enforcement of fines. I called Lisa. She said 10 in the morning on a weekday was absurd. She said the bylaws required hearings to be scheduled at reasonable times when homeowners could attend. She said this was another tactic, scheduling hearings at impossible times so I no-show and they default vote. I told my boss I needed to take a few hours off Thursday morning. He said fine. I cleared my calendar. Then I started digging. I went to the Worcester City Clerk's office and asked for public records related to the Fairview Estates Association. The clerk, an older man with reading glasses on a chain, pulled up the HOA's registration file. He said HOAs in Massachusetts had to file certain documents with the city, including management contracts and amendments to governing documents. I asked if the fence rule Diane kept quoting was on file. He searched. There was no record of a design guideline amendment in the last 5 years. That is interesting, the clerk said. If the rule was adopted after incorporation, it should be filed here. What if it was never properly adopted, I said. Then it is not enforceable, he said. I asked for copies of everything on file. He printed a stack of documents. I paid the fee and left. On the way home, I called Lisa and told her what I found. She said that was a strong defense, but we needed to be careful. The HOA could argue the rule was part of the original covenants. We needed to check the recorded deed restrictions. I pulled the original covenants from my closing documents that night. I read every page. The fence section was 2 paragraphs. It said fences must be chain link or wood, no higher than 6 feet, and must be maintained in good repair. It said nothing about design palettes, pre-approval for modifications, or privacy screening. The rule Diane kept quoting was not in the covenants. It was in a separate design guidelines document that was never recorded. I let her call my bluff, because she did not realize I was not bluffing. Thursday morning, I drove to the HOA management office, a small suite in a strip mall near Route 9. The hearing was in a conference room with a long table and 6 chairs. Diane was already there, sitting at the head of the table with 2 other board members. One was a man in his 60s wearing a polo shirt. The other was a woman in her 40s with a tablet. The management company representative, a tired-looking woman named Carol, sat at the far end taking notes. I sat down. Diane did not look at me. She opened a binder and started reading from a script. She said I had violated Section 4.7 of the design guidelines by installing unapproved fence screening. She said the violation was documented with photos and witness statements. She said the HOA was seeking immediate removal and fines, totaling $300 for 3 days of non-compliance. Do you have anything to say? Carol asked. I do, I said. I pulled out the city clerk's documents and the covenant pages. I said the design guideline Diane is quoting is not in the recorded covenants and was never properly filed with the city. I said the only enforceable fence rule is in the original covenants, and my privacy screen does not violate it. Diane's face went tight. She said the design guidelines had been in effect for years, and every homeowner received a copy at closing. I said that did not matter. If the guidelines were not recorded as a deed restriction and not properly adopted through a board vote with notice to homeowners, they were not enforceable. The man in the polo shirt leaned forward. He said Diane might be right that I was in violation, but he was not comfortable saying it on the record without checking the documents first. That was the side complication. He admitted Karen was wrong but refused to say it on the record. Diane snapped at him. The rule is clear, she said. I do not care what you think, I care what the rule says. There it was again. The catchphrase. Carol, the management rep, looked uncomfortable. She said the board should table the matter and consult with the HOA attorney before proceeding. Diane said no. She said the violation was obvious and the board needed to vote today. The woman with the tablet said she agreed with Carol. The man in the polo shirt said he wanted to wait. Diane looked at me. Fine, she said. We will reconvene in 2 weeks. But if you do not remove that screening, I will make sure the fines continue. I am not removing it, I said. The hearing ended. I walked out and called Lisa from the parking lot. I told her what happened. She said we had won the delay, but we needed to push harder. She said she would draft a demand letter to the HOA attorney laying out the procedural defects and the lack of recorded authority. She said we should also request a copy of the management contract to confirm the company was properly retained. I said okay. Then I went home and got back to work. I had 3 client calls that afternoon and I was already behind. My truck was essential for my commute and the HOA towing threat was a serious danger. If they impounded my truck, I could not get to client sites and that would cost me contracts. That night I reviewed my doorbell camera footage from the past week. I had hours of recordings. Most of it was nothing, just cars driving by and neighbors walking dogs. But there were 3 clips of Diane. One showed her walking up my driveway and taking photos of the fence. Another showed her standing at the curb on her phone, pointing at my truck. The third showed her talking to the tow truck driver, gesturing at my house. I downloaded all 3 clips and saved them in a folder labeled evidence. The next morning I got an email from the HOA attorney. His name was Richard. The email said he had reviewed my objections and the board's request for enforcement. He said the design guidelines were part of the HOA's governing documents and were enforceable as written. He said the board had the authority to impose fines for non-compliance. He said if I did not remove the screening within 7 days, the HOA would proceed with formal enforcement, including fines, liens, and potential legal action. I forwarded the email to Lisa. She replied, "He is bluffing. The guidelines are not enforceable without proper adoption. Do not back down." I did not. 2 days later, Diane showed up at my house again. This time she had a contractor with her, a guy in a work shirt with a tool belt. They walked up to my side gate, the one that led to the backyard. The gate was closed and latched. Diane tried to open it. I saw them on my doorbell camera and came outside. "What are you doing?" I said. "The HOA has authorized an inspection of your fence to document the violation," Diane said. "This is the contractor we use for compliance enforcement." "You are not coming into my yard," I said. "We have the right to access common areas and easements," Diane said. "This is my private property," I said, "not a common area." The contractor looked at Diane. He said he was not comfortable forcing entry without a legal order. Diane pulled out her phone and started filming again, the gimbal stabilizer making every movement smooth and deliberate. She said I was obstructing a lawful inspection and she was documenting my refusal to comply. I pulled out my phone and started recording her. She did not like that. She said I was harassing her. I said she was trespassing. The contractor said he was leaving. He walked back to his truck and drove away. Diane stayed. She walked along the fence line, filming every section, narrating into her phone about non-compliant materials and unapproved modifications. I called Lisa and put her on speaker. Diane heard Lisa's voice and stopped talking. Lisa said Diane was trespassing and if she did not leave immediately, I should call the police. Diane said she was on a public sidewalk. Lisa said the property line extended to the curb and Diane was standing in my driveway. Diane finally left. That was the moment I realized this was not going to end with letters and hearings. Diane was escalating because she could. She controlled the board, she controlled the management company, and she believed the rules gave her absolute authority. I needed something bigger. I spent the next 3 days digging through every document I could find. I reviewed the HOA's filed articles of incorporation, the original developer disclosures, the recorded covenants, and the management contract. That is when I found it. The management contract was expired. The Fairview Estates Association had signed a 3-year agreement with the management company in 2019. The contract expired in 2022. There was no renewal on file. The management company was operating without a valid contract. That was the twist. The management company Carol worked for had no legal authority to represent the HOA. Every letter they sent, every hearing they scheduled, every fine they threatened was void. I sent the expired contract to Lisa. She called me back in 5 minutes. She said this was huge. She said we could challenge every enforcement action the management company had taken in the last 2 years, not just against me, but against every homeowner in the subdivision. She said we needed to bring this to the board and force them to address it publicly. I said I was ready. Lisa said she would prepare a formal demand letter and a notice to the board. She said we should also notify the state attorney general's office, because operating without a valid management contract could be a violation of Massachusetts nonprofit law. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. It was open to homeowners. I had never been to one before. Lisa said I should go bring copies of the expired contract and present the issue during the public comment period. She said I should also bring a second copy for the HOA attorney, so the legal risk was obvious. Tuesday evening, I drove to the community clubhouse where the board held meetings. The room was small, about 20 folding chairs facing a table at the front. Diane was at the table with the other board members. Carol from the management company was there too, sitting off to the side with a laptop. There were maybe a dozen homeowners in the chairs. I sat in the back row. The meeting started with routine business: budget updates, landscaping bids, pool schedule changes. Then Diane opened the floor for new business. She said the board had received complaints about non-compliant fences, and the Architectural Review Committee was stepping up enforcement. She did not mention my name, but everyone knew. If you are enjoying this chaos, please hit like and subscribe so you do not miss the next disaster. During public comment, I stood up. I said my name and address. Then I said I had discovered the HOA's management contract was expired and no renewal had been filed. I held up the printed contract with the expiration date highlighted. I said every enforcement action taken by the management company in the last 2 years was potentially void. The room went silent. Diane's face turned red. Carol stood up and said the contract had been renewed verbally and the paperwork was in process. I said verbal renewals were not valid under Massachusetts law, and there was no record of a board vote authorizing a new contract. One of the homeowners in the front row said she had been fined last year for a mailbox violation and wanted to know if her fine was void. Another homeowner said he had paid a $300 architectural review fee and wanted a refund. Diane tried to regain control. She said the board would review the contract issue and provide an update at the next meeting. I said that was not good enough. I said the board needed to suspend all enforcement actions immediately until the contract issue was resolved. I walked to the front table and handed Diane a copy of Lisa's demand letter. Then I handed a second copy to the HOA attorney, Richard, who was sitting next to Carol. Richard read the letter, and his expression changed. He leaned over and whispered something to Diane. Diane stood up. She said the board needed to go into executive session to consult with legal counsel. She said the meeting was adjourned. The homeowners started talking all at once, asking questions, demanding answers. Diane ignored them and walked out of the room with Richard and Carol. I stayed for another 10 minutes, talking to the other homeowners. Several of them gave me their contact information and said they wanted to file complaints about fines and fees. One woman said Diane had threatened to tow her car 3 times over a guest parking issue. Another man said he had been fined for pressure washing his driveway without a permit, the same issue I had ignored. When I got home, Lisa called. She said Richard had emailed her. He said the board was willing to meet and discuss a resolution. Lisa said that meant they were scared. She said we should push for a full audit of the management company's actions and a refund of any fees or fines collected under the expired contract. I agreed. Lisa said she would set up a meeting with Richard for later that week. The meeting happened Thursday afternoon at Richard's office in downtown Worcester. It was me, Lisa, Richard, Diane, and Carol. We sat in a conference room with a view of the parking lot. Richard started by saying the board took the contract issue seriously and was working to resolve it. Lisa said that was not enough. She said the board needed to suspend all enforcement actions, void all fines issued in the last 2 years, and refund any fees collected by the management company. Diane said that was ridiculous. She said the management company had been operating in good faith and homeowners had been properly notified of violations. Lisa said good faith did not matter when the contract was expired and the company had no legal standing. Richard said the board could agree to suspend new enforcement actions while the contract issue was being resolved, but he could not recommend voiding past fines without a legal review. Lisa said we would take that to court if necessary. She said we had a strong case and the homeowners we had spoken to were ready to join a class action. That got Richard's attention. He said he would recommend the board authorize an independent audit of the management company's records and fee collection practices. He said if the audit found improper charges, the board would issue refunds. Diane tried to argue. Richard cut her off. He said the legal risk was too high to ignore. Carol said the management company would cooperate with the audit. She looked defeated. I could see she knew the expired contract was a disaster for her company. Lisa said we also needed a resolution on my fence. She said the design guideline Diane had been enforcing was not recorded and not properly adopted, and my privacy screening was compliant with the covenants. Richard nodded. He said he had reviewed the covenants and agreed the screening was not a violation. Diane stood up. She said this was outrageous. She said I had ignored HOA rules from day one, and now I was using technicalities to avoid accountability. Lisa said the rules had to be valid and enforceable, and Diane's enforcement tactics had been illegal. Diane said she was doing her job. Lisa said her job did not include harassment, illegal tow threats, and trespassing. Richard told Diane to sit down. He said the board would vote to remove the enforcement action against my fence and void the fines. He said the board would also adopt a policy clarification that destroys Karen's favorite tactic, requiring recorded amendments for any design guideline changes and mandatory notice to homeowners before enforcement. Diane sat down. She looked like she wanted to scream. The meeting ended. Richard said he would send a formal settlement agreement within a week. Lisa said we would review it and respond. We left. In the parking lot, Lisa said we had won. She said the fence issue was resolved, the management contract problem was forcing a system-wide fix, and the policy change would protect other homeowners. I said thank you. She said I had done the hard work by documenting everything and not backing down. The settlement agreement arrived 5 days later. It said the HOA removes the enforcement action and voids the ledger entry for my fence violation. It said the board would authorize an independent audit of management company fees and fines dating back to 2022. It said any improper charges identified in the audit would be refunded with interest. It said the board would adopt new procedures requiring recorded amendments and homeowner notice for design guideline enforcement. I signed it, Lisa filed it. 2 weeks later, the board held a special meeting to present the audit results. I went. So did about 30 other homeowners. The auditor, a woman in a suit with a thick binder, explained that the management company had collected over $40,000 in fees, fines, and late charges during the period when the contract was expired. She said many of those charges were tied to notices and hearings that did not follow the HOA's bylaws. She said the board was recommending full refunds for improper charges. Diane was not at the meeting. Richard said she had resigned from the board the week before. The board voted to approve the refunds. The vote was unanimous. Then one of the homeowners in the front row stood up and asked if the board would formally apologize for the way Diane had treated residents. The board president, the man in the polo shirt from the hearing, said the board recognized that enforcement tactics had been overly aggressive and inconsistent with the HOA's mission. He did not mention Diane by name, but everyone knew. Then something happened that I had not expected. Another board member, the woman with the tablet, made a motion to require Diane to apologize on the record in front of the room if she wanted to remain involved in any HOA activities. The motion failed because Diane had already resigned, but the intent was clear. The board wanted distance. A homeowner in the back row asked what would happen to the management company. Richard said the board had voted not to renew the contract and was interviewing new firms. Carol was not at the meeting. After the meeting, several homeowners came up to me and said thank you. One man shook my hand and said I had saved him $600 in bogus fines. A woman said her husband had been threatened with a lien over a shed violation and now the lien was void. I said I was just protecting my own fence. They said it mattered. I drove home and sat in my driveway for a minute, looking at the gray privacy screening on my chain link fence. It was still there. It was still compliant. Diane had tried to make it a violation, and she had lost. The next week, I got a check in the mail from the Fairview Estates Association. It was a refund for the $300 in fines Diane had tried to collect, plus $18 in interest. I deposited it. A month later, the board sent a newsletter to all homeowners summarizing the audit findings, the refunds, and the new enforcement procedures. The newsletter said the board was committed to fair and transparent governance. It said design guideline changes would require recorded amendments and homeowner votes. It said enforcement actions would follow strict procedural rules with proper notice and hearings. It said the board welcomed feedback and participation. I read it twice. It sounded like someone had finally realized that HOA rules only work when they are actually rules. I also got an email from Lisa. She said another homeowner in the subdivision had contacted her about a similar issue with pool access fees. She said the new enforcement procedures I had forced the board to adopt were already being used to challenge other improper charges. She said the ripple effect was real. I replied, "Good." A few weeks after that, I was working in my backyard when I heard a car pull up. I looked through the fence and saw Diane's white SUV parked at the curb. My stomach tightened. Then I saw her get out and walk up to a house 3 doors down. She knocked. A woman answered. They talked for a minute. Then Diane handed her something, got back in her car, and left. I found out later from a neighbor that Diane had been going door to door trying to get homeowners to sign a petition to recall the current board. She said the board had betrayed the community by caving to my demands. The petition went nowhere. No one signed it. Diane moved out of the neighborhood 2 months later. I heard she bought a condo in a building with no HOA. I still live in the same house. My fence still has the gray privacy screening. I still get HOA newsletters. The new management company is fine. They follow the rules. They send proper notices. They do not threaten to tow my truck. Every time I see that screening on my fence, I think about the chain and padlock gate standoff, where Diane tried to lock my gate and I stopped her in front of witnesses. That moment was the breaking point. She had shown up with a padlock and a length of chain, planning to lock my side gate to prevent me from accessing my backyard. I had seen her on the doorbell camera and came out immediately. She was threading the chain through the gate latch when I grabbed the other end. We stood there both holding the chain, faces inches apart. The couple on the porch down the street were watching again. Diane said the HOA had the authority to secure non-compliant access points. I said she was trespassing and committing vandalism. She tried to yank the chain out of my hand. I did not let go. A neighbor walking his dog stopped and asked if everything was okay. I said, "No, this woman is trying to lock my gate." The neighbor said he would call the police. Diane dropped the chain and left. That confrontation was caught on video. That video became part of the evidence package Lisa sent to Richard. That video was one of the reasons the board forced Diane to resign. I appreciate you rolling with the chaos.